Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Aoife Hartigan, and I did my part of the project on the former Mafia member Mikey Scars. And through my research, I mainly delved into his YouTube videos, and I found a couple that all kind of had a very similar through line that I think give a very interesting perspective on who he is as a person and why he's filming and talking about his experiences and putting it on the internet. So the first video I found is from a clip called "I Didn't Take an Oath to John Gotti," uh, which I'll explain a little bit later. And the clip that I chose talks a little bit about his history being an informant, basically.
Free, and there's people in jail not coming home because of me, because of crimes they committed that I have divulged. And that's the awareness, part of the awareness of where we are in cooperation and guys in their life that, hey, listen, we had guys that get death penalty years ago. We had guys that did like many, I bet you a couple hundred guys died in jail, defending Cosa Nostra and the oath. Let me see if I could be clear. When you started as a kid and you're in the street,
I think he has a very complicated view on the concept of like cooperating or informing, because it's very clear that he still thinks it's wrong, even though he participated in it. He said something to the tune of, "I'm free and there's people in jail who are not coming home because of me." And he admits like they did do things wrong, they did commit crimes, but I'm the one who put them in jail. So he very much takes responsibility for that. And he kind of lumps together, in another clip of the video, he lumps together informing, cooperating, tattletaling, and ratting. He said they're all the same thing. It's just really a matter of perspective, which is interesting. But his idea of the matter of perspective is that, like, when you are the informant, instead of calling it tattletaling or ratting, to make informants, like, for them to make themselves feel better, they call it informing or cooperating, so that they feel like what they're doing is a good thing, which I agree that it is a good thing, but he clearly still has some qualms with the fact that he was someone who cooperated. I do think this podcast is very interesting because it seems like it's a way for him to process some of the information, and process some of the things that have happened to him, and talk about things that he's never been allowed to talk about before. He talks a lot about Omerta and not being able to discuss anything mafia related. So I think the fact that his job is now discussing those things is a little like freeing for him. It's a way to fight what he's been conditioned to do. And he seems like a very genuine person. This first video caught my eye because he seemed very honest and not very boastful. Some of the other people that we've seen in class, or the people that I've seen online, are very boisterous people who talk loudly and very passionately. And he is passionate, but in a much more reserved way, which I kind of appreciate. So it really endeared me to him because he has very interesting thoughts on blame and responsibility. And he started to get like very philosophical. He was talking about how even though he's no longer a part of that life, like you can't unpinch that finger, like you can't uninitiate him, he's always going to be the same person who he was. He wouldn't do the same things he did, but he admits that he still takes responsibility for the things that he did earlier in his life. He's not like pretending that that's a different person. And he's saying in these videos that people are built with survival instincts, and part of those instincts are to put the blame on other people when you've done something uncomfortable that you're not okay with. But he's kind of in this very enlightened position in life where he recognizes the ill that he's done, but still takes ownership for it. So I thought that was very interesting.
accepted what I did as wrong. You're not supposed to cooperate. That is clear. You're in that life, you take that oath. You don't cooperate. Again, this guy justifies everything he does as righteous or John's fault or somebody else's fault. So my position is it's up to you to decide if I'm a hypocrite or not, and I'll accept what you say. But the difference between him and I is we both cooperated. Whatever the reasons that made me jump were wrong. He's still making the case every day it was somebody else's fault. and he's still a gangster, and he's still a murderer, and he still challenges people. Big difference between Sammy and I, in my mind. I'll leave it judgment up to everybody out there if we did see the difference between Gravano and myself, as opposed to what he owns up to and what I own up to.
Okay, this next video is about Sammy the Bull. He was also an informant, and Mikey talks about him, and it is very clear that he is very much against informing, which I thought was very interesting. Being away from this life that he used to be in, he feels remorse for what he's done. He's very apologetic and he's very genuine, which endears me to him. But he continues to talk about how cooperating and informing is wrong, and it's how he was brought up. He says, like, you're taught from day one to speak is the only thing you can't do. Like, violence is permitted, violence is allowed and encouraged, but to speak about these things is against the code of being in the mafia. So I think it's still just built into him from a young age that this is betraying the institution of the mafia, not just the people that he, like, in his eyes, snitched on, which I thought was very interesting. But there is a point at the end that I thought was, again, very endearing. He lets the audience decide how to view him, and he really emphasizes that his opinion is not fact. He's saying, this is how I feel based on my experiences. I'll let you judge me for what I've done. He's not trying to seem like a martyr. He's not trying to seem like a perfect person. He's being honest. He's putting his truth out there, and he's letting the power of opinion prevail, which I really like. Again, this is it's confusing to think about because I'm conflicted, but I'm very endeared towards him. I like him, and I think I like what he's doing online.
Like what's been said that John Gotti did 1,000 push-ups a day in prison. Do you believe it? And did you do any push-ups while you were in prison?
Let's talk about John first. John used to tell a story himself that when he used to hear the CO coming down, he would jump on the floor and go, 980, 981, 982, 1,000. You'll fuck yourself. They all thought he did 1,000 push-ups a day at a time, one shot. They go, hey, John just did 1,000 push-ups. It's just, it's just little things. Again, John sticks in my head a lot.
This last video is less about cooperating and more about the character of Mikey Scars himself. I think it speaks a lot about how he still views the mafia. I think it's very intriguing how he talks about John Gotti. A lot of his content is about John Gotti because of his experiences with him, but also he talks very positively of him. He remembers, like, fun stories, and he said, like, John really sticks in my head, seemingly a lot more than the other people that he was in the mafia with. And again, he seems remorseful for what he's done, but the way he talks about his experience in the mafia and the people in the mafia still makes me feel conflicted because he has a lot of remorse for cooperating. He hasn't really made it clear in a lot of his content if he feels bad about the things he did when he was in the mafia, just about the thing he did when he was getting out, which he doesn't have to, but I think it makes an interesting case when he speaks highly of this person and he talks about fun memories of them, and then he talks about how him turning on his bosses or his fellow men in the mafia was one of, like, the worst things he's ever done. So I'm kind of back at this crossroads with him, and I think his entire life he's been in the mafia, so I think it's clearly had a toll on him, and I'm sure he's had some, like, fond memories that he looks back on, but I am conflicted about how I feel about him because he's a very genuine person. He seems to have a lot of remorse. He's very apologetic about what he's done. He's very honest, which are all valuable traits, but I don't know if he's creating this content with the intent of steering people away from the mafia or telling people the honest truth about it. I think it's more so an outlet for himself.
Today I'm going to be talking about Anthony Orlata, former acting boss of the Springfield faction of the Genovese crime family. During his time in this crime family, he was a part of drug trafficking, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, and more significantly, he admitted to being involved in multiple murders, including the murder of his own brother-in-law. In 2010, Orlata flipped and became a government witness. His testimony helped convict several major players in organized crime. And now that he's out of prison, he is considered a podfather, since he turned to platforms like YouTube and podcasts to share his story. But the big question today is this real redemption, or is it just a performance? Is he truly remorseful, or just capitalizing on the only route left that doesn't involve jail or the grave? Let's take a look at a few key clips that caught my attention, starting with one from Fox News.
I mean, you were so candid. You were so revealing. No excuses. You're forthright in talking about that life. What do you want people, our viewers, now to know? Because they don't often get to meet a mob guy.
Yeah, thank you for having me, my friend. Good to see you. Yeah, that life is it's a double-edged sword. It's a great life in one way, you know, making money, the power that comes with it. But it all turns bad. You know, the violence comes, the murders, the prison sentences, the long prison sentences, and, you know, the loss of family when you're incarcerated. Everything just ends up bad. So, you know, it's good in ways as far as financial ways and making money, but then, you know, everything else is outweighed by the destruction it causes at the end.
You know, the movies that made it glamorous and all that, is that, you know, the way it really is, or the reality is treachery, crimes, evil, and this sort of thing? Yeah,
I mean, I loved the life, to be honest with you. I loved the thrill of waking up, hitting the streets, making the money. You make lots of money, the power that comes with it. That's all great. The bad thing is you're probably going to end up having to murder somebody, especially back then. You know, murder was a way that you could be initiated in as a made member. And most likely you're going to have to murder somebody that's close to you, maybe. In our cases, there was a lot of murder conspiracies, you know, with friends that I grew up with. And the violence that comes with it. So, the treachery that comes with it, and the violence are the demise of it at the end. But you need that when it comes to running a family based on fear. You need that murder aspect of it.
Now, you were charged, accused of being involved in a murder, actually two, one involving the previous skipper in your crew in Massachusetts. What made you, decide that, no, I'm turning my back on this life for now and I'm going to cooperate, which you did with the government, and serve time?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end, faced with life in prison without the possibility of parole, you're going to lose your family and everything. That has a big part of it, and, you weigh in the betrayal of that life with everything that comes your way, the betrayal of people breaking an oath, cooperating, informants coming at you. And you're like a sheep led to the slaughterhouse. You're like a sheep that's being led to be crucified, and then you have a decision to make, and it's a really hard decision. Anybody that tells you, that's probably one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my life. It's not something I wanted to do, but at the end of the day, it's something I'm glad I did, and I'm thankful I did at that time to have enough strength to make that decision. And be out here and, be back with, you have your freedom back, and to be back with your family. What's at the end of the day, what's more important? Your oath you take with a mafia and to go out and kill people, or your family, your family, your wife, your kids, your mother, father, that outweighs the,
Right off the bat, it feels like the weight of his regrets fall more on how it ended for him and not what he actually did. He talks about the mob like it was a job gone bad, even going as far as to say how much he loved it and the power that came with it. And yes, he does mention murder as a downside, but it's almost like an afterthought. He spends way more time emphasizing the prison time, the betrayals, and how how being in the mafia led to bad consequences. To me, that's not genuine remorse. It's kind of just inconvenience. It sounds more like he's mad that things are spiraling out of control than that people actually got hurt. It's a fictional redemption arc dressed up as a reflection, but when you really listen, it's hollow and he's not really emotional and not apologetic. This clip really stood out to me because of how he describes his mafia baptism.
You did actually get made into the Genovese. What year was that?
2003, August 11th, day before my daughter was born. There was 4 of us that got made that day. We went to an apartment building in the Bronx. They did 2 at a time. They told you to get down into your boxes. They put a bathrobe on you. They walked you in. There was bosses sitting on the table, gun and a knife, and you repeat after all the same oaths. Would you kill your brother? Would you leave your wife on her deathbed if we called you? All the same stuff that nobody would ever in their right mind do.
Right.
And we all said we would do it. And you kiss on the cheek out. They prick your finger, blood comes out. You're burning the tissue, talking about betraying Omerta and the saint. You're gonna burn like the saint. Like they had a saint card, but the tissue was burning, and you're going like this, and then you cuff it up with your hands, and they kiss you at the end. Hello, friend, and that's it. You're a made guy.
You did.
Okay, so in this clip, we saw Arlotta describe his mafia baptism, and he lists all these wild, extreme promises that they were forced to make during the pledging, like to kill their own brother or abandoning their wife on her deathbed. And then he says, nobody in their right mind would do that. This took me a bit by surprise because even though he did go through with that life for years, and he clearly acknowledged how insane and inhumane those expectations really were. And in a way, that comment shows a level of self-awareness, like he's consciously admitting just how twisted things had to get for him to be able to do the things that he did. He's not glorifying it, but he's actually showing how messed up the world was and probably still is. This kind of reflection feels like an important crack in the surface. Maybe not full-blown remorse, but definitely a recognition of how brainwashed or numb you have to be to follow through with that kind of life. But here's another clip that made me pause on the thought that he was feeling actual true remorse.
Everybody said, like when they were saying that mafia is dead, I don't think it's ever going to be dead. And I think it's going to be even bigger than what it was. It's just going to be different. It's going to be, the rackets on the street aren't the same. Okay. So sports is getting legalized everywhere. The loan shark is a hard business. You're going to have a little bit of loan sharks here and there, but that's not going to feed a family, mafia family. So they're going to they're going to adapt. Drugs is the main, source of business, but they're not going to get, involved with, them hardcore drugs that give you a lot of time. So I think they're going to stay with more legitimate, which is what I wanted to do in my area. Focus on the legitimate industries, Everybody said, like when they were saying that hardcore drugs that give you a lot of time. So I think they're going to stay with more legitimate, which is what I wanted to do in my area. Focus on the legitimate industries, Everybody said, like when they were saying that drugs is the main, source of business, but they're not going to get involved with, them hardcore drugs that give you a lot of time. So I think they're going to stay with more legitimate, which is what I wanted to do in my area. Focus on the legitimate industries,
This clip really made me pause. Arlotta talks a lot about how the mafia will never truly go away and how it just exists in different ways. And the structure might change, but it'll always be around. And the tone here doesn't really sound like someone who's warning people or condemning the life. It just sounds like someone who's almost admiring, like he's impressed with the mafia's ability to adapt. It honestly comes off like he's egging them on, or at the very least validating the organization's longevity, which is wild considering everything he supposedly walked away from. If his mindset was really changed, if he had truly rejected the mafia and what it stands for, wouldn't he be using his platform to discourage people from following that path, or to show how destructive and hollow that life really is?